Welcome to Mr. Feels, a podcast about feelings.
Nope.
I'm your host, Tyler, the Mayman, the Merman,
That's me.
May, and I'm your guest.
The merman. Also,
I'm Laura.
the little merman.
I'm Laura. Don't burn me on that Bunsen.
Don't burn me on that Bunsen Benson.
Did you get that in school?
Never.
Really?
Yeah.
That's why people from your school aren't doing podcasts now. Clearly they
And
weren't
that's
sharp
me.
enough.
I'm Jordan.
Bunsen.
Bunsen Benson.
I'm Jordan, other school equipment cope.
And I'm your host, Morris Bremner, MD.
Okay, so
That's
he's
such
at
a
least
knock.
11 because it takes that long to get an empty.
I remember when I graduated med school at 15 years old.
As we all have.
Sing it if you know it. Dun, 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 dun.
Feeling stuff with my friends.
Hello and welcome to Mr. Feels podcast. I am your host, Tyler May.
And I'm your other host, Laura Benson.
Me too.
And this week we have Jordan
And I'm your other Benson. Laura Benson and your other Benson.
Dude,
It's a reference
nice.
to Kanye West, who we can't have fun with anymore because he's a bad boy now.
Oh no.
Is he persona non grata from jokes as well, or just?
It's just I feel bad because I have all this encyclopedic knowledge about him, and it's not useful anymore.
It's suddenly become useless.
It's like if I was like the author of the Cosby Show Wikipedia page.
Oh, with that being said, please don't vamp off of that.
And today we're our subject talking about comedy in inappropriate ways.
Yeah.
That was actually a really good segue.
if you can imagine.
Tyler, do you want to introduce our
It's
guest?
almost like I'm a professional.
All right. This week we have my friends Jordan and Jarvis of the Sad Boys podcast. Welcome, boys.
Hey, thank you. I've never been welcomed on a podcast before. This is
Really?
fun. Not as
Yeah.
a collective, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah.
Nobody wants to welcome you.
So, I'm Jarvis.
And I am Jordan. Let it be known.
Let it be
Let
known.
the
All right.
gong ring
Can
out
we get
into
a
the
clean
all four
cut?
realms that those are our names.
When in doubt, one of us is British and their name is Jarvis.
Please bear in mind, don't rewind. Be kind.
Unwind and listen to a brand new episode of Mr. Feels.
Aw.
Now, Tyler, what are we talking about today?
Tyler, welcome to Sad Boys. Yeah, we should have told you before we started recording. The goal with this episode is to gradually hijack it into yet another episode of Sad Boys.
Yeah. So this week we are talking about comedy and mental health and good ways and bad ways to use comedy to help as a coping mechanism and just as a way of dealing with life and mental health in general.
And at the very end, we'll choose who was funnier
Yeah.
And we
and
vote
who was
someone
mentally
off the
healthiest.
We all
Mentally
lose.
healthy.
And remember to vote. Our lines are open. Call the number at the bottom of the screen.
Really tearing their phone apart looking for the number. I can't see it anywhere.
We are actually all in one location right now in lovely, cloudy San Francisco. And
Have you two recorded together before?
Yes. Like
One time.
what?
Two times.
Have you
Two times, I
two?
think.
Have you met?
No, actually, no. I've made it a bet that I can't look at her directly, just so we
Oh.
have
Well,
this.
yeah, it's overwhelming
podcast.
sometimes.
Oh.
Oh, that's nice. So we should both just look at her.
No breaking eye contact for the next 55 minutes. Go.
I won't laugh when you make a joke. I'll just widen my eyes. Oh, good.
That's
That
good.
up and
I don't
downs,
really
to let her
make
know.
jokes, Jordan. This is a very serious podcast.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. Oh, sorry. It's like a seamless segue into the topic. So the official name of the topic is what, Tyler?
I just want probably comedy and mental health.
Oh yeah, well that's a pretty good one. I just want probably comedy and mental health.
Yeah, I feel kind of nervous about it, but here's a flawless answer.
It's pretty simple, pretty accurate.
All right.
Jarvis and Jordan are two of the funniest people that I actually know, and their podcast, Sad Boys, I hate sometimes because it's genuinely one of the best podcasts that I listen to, and I'm very proud of these boys.
Oh,
So
wow.
thank you for coming on the show. I'm buttering you up so you don't hijack this and make it a
That
Sad
was
Boys
so
episode.
nice. I'm gonna put, you know what? I'm gonna put
Be
away
good
all the
for
sound
ratings.
effects from our show.
Yeah, I'm gonna put
I was gonna put them in, but this is nice.
Yeah, I'll put down my knife.
My ceremonial podcast knife.
It helps with the acoustics.
Don't bring in the goat. We're just gonna do Mr. Fields. But yeah, we're very honored to be on the show. We
Yeah, very
too
much
are
so.
fans, which is why we were able to sing along so flawlessly to the theme tune. And I knew all the lyrics.
Yeah, it's good to have you both on like 3 or 4 months after I was on Sad Boys to really get that connection and SEO built up.
Long
for
tail
us.
on that episode, yeah.
Scheduling is tough for podcasts. It's like
Yeah,
coordinating a lot of people for a long period of time in the outside world.
I actually have no doubt in my mind that we have successfully scheduled more podcasts with us and a guest than I have scheduled one-on-one hangouts with any friend
Yeah.
in the last year. It's like if I'm in a room or like at a bar with 5 people, half the time we're talking about it, but for the first like hour or so, we're all just like, can you believe we're just all outside?
Like all of us together in one room. What are the odds?
You don't have to do what you can just hang out. This is crazy. This is great.
It really just speaks to how like high strung Jordan and I are with our like schedules and busyness that like we just are bad at finding time to do things.
Oh yeah, it's like a lack of skill. That's the
It's a
reason
lack
I
of
don't hang
skill.
out with people. But that's why we have shows like this, so we can hang out with our good friends Tyler May and Laura
Yeah,
Benson.
to take organic relationships and turn them into work. That's what I stand here.
That's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
Tear all of the sincerity out of an otherwise burgeoning relationship and turn it into sweet cash.
Yeah.
Oh, you're interested in this thing? Let's do it together. And add 10 layers of stress onto it. And make
Content.
sure we squeeze all the joy out of it. I'm just kidding. I love doing this.
I just always wanted to be
Save.
one of the.
Oh, just kidding. Anyway, give me my
To all of our
ad rev.
past guests and future guests. We love this so much. No,
just-
actually, I do, though.
You're really selling it.
I told you I don't make jokes.
My eyes are so wide.
I mean, I just wish I could just be alone and stop doing this forever. No, just kidding. I love this
Just
show.
playing.
It's just playing.
I'm just fooling.
I've just always wanted to be on one of those podcasts where I could say to the other hosts like, "Oh my god, it's like so funny how it's so hard for us to like hang out, and so we have to like do this show." So it's like to like talk with my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, me and Ira Glass. Finally, we found the time to sit down, Ira, my friend.
Yeah, I just feel like every comedian podcast, which is another segue into the topic, is two comedians going like, "Yeah, we never find the time to hang, but it's a good thing we have this show so that we can have a conversation."
Yeah.
Wow.
Initially, it always kicks off. We'll run through it. Knock, knock, knock. Already recording. The show is
Yeah,
already
no,
going.
I was supposed to. No, you were knock, knock, knock. Oh, is this recording?
Oh, we just go.
We just go?
we
Oh,
just
okay.
go, baby. Ooh, we just go. I'm so glad you could come down.
Oh, thanks, Pete. Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be on. You made it weird because you were making such a specific reference to a specific show.
Love that show. Perfect example of a comedic show about feelings and other things also. Speaking of, Sad Boys, available now on Apple and Spotify, if you can
Thank
believe
you
it.
guys.
Really,
That's
anywhere
the end of the
podcasts are sold.
episode. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Mr. Fields Podcast.
No, we promised we wouldn't segue out of the show. We want to do the show.
Well, I'm glad that you want to do this
Is that like
because
the legal rules? It's like if you can segue out of a show, you.
Yeah.
Like, well, my hands are tied.
it
He
was such a
successfully
smooth
segued out of
transition.
the
I
show.
couldn't not.
It's like if you're in the passenger seat of a car and you push the driver out and take it over, it is now your car.
Got it.
Fortunately,
Makes sense.
which is
Squat.
also the law.
This episode's going to be a little bit different, a lot of bit different than probably all our other episodes because we're not necessarily deep diving into somebody's emotional well-being throughout their entirety. But I would like to kind of just start by getting not like, Jordan, when did you realize you were funny? But like, how did you first start using comedy, and not only as like a device to make relationships and better friendships, but sometimes as a coping mechanism? Because before going into this episode, we kind of talked about, let's just jump into it. And our main theme is comedy and mental health, and comedy as a coping mechanism. It's pretty
Right.
much the only bullet point that we have, because I feel comfortable enough that you guys know how to talk.
To a fault.
For
Just
those-
dead
for
silence
those
for the
look
next.
look down at your phone right now, listener, and see 20 minutes of time. And it was just me and Jordan making jokes over the actual host of the show.
As the show happened. In front of the show.
Well, Jordan, do you want to kind of start and just like, what's your first experiences that you can remember just with using laughter?
I remember very early on, which was a repeating factor throughout the rest of my life. Very early on in my primary school days, we're talking 5, we're talking 7, we're talking 8 years old. 9, maybe. I don't fully remember, but I know it's basically all the single digits. I remember
All the single digits.
all the single digits.
Now put your hands up.
Man, that has to be a mashup, surely. All the small things,
All right.
all the single ladies.
Let's go back to primary school.
Anyway, back to Sad Boys.
Back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity.
You say that on every podcast that you've ever been on.
It's a good meme.
I'm bleeping that out.
But yeah, in primary school, I specifically remember. I don't remember a moment where I started to like making jokes. I just remember very distinctly my teachers starting to say, "Hey, you're distracting people, and it's becoming an issue that you're doing this." And ever since that day, I mean, even now, I sometimes feel very self-conscious about the idea that I could be sapping the focus or energy from a room. I just kind of want to contribute positivity. And some people can do that with very sincere comments or like assertions or political commentary. I'm dumb as a brick. So I hop in there. I'm just like, have you ever noticed that white people walk like this and black people walk like this? And then like, that's my way of connecting with people. But yeah, I very distinctly remember from day dot, people just being like, hey, stop being such a class clown. I'm trying to get stuff done, and being frustrated because it always felt, hey, you can't put 15 children in a room and ask them to not have fun.
Man, Jarvis, do you have any like memories of like starting to be a funny boy?
I was never the class clown. I always wanted people to like me though, and I think that I like learned to be funny or learned to like try to make people laugh as a coping mechanism or as a way to exist in environments that I felt like I was made fun of. Like in elementary school and stuff, I was always made fun of for like the gap in my teeth and like I have like a scar on my head from like falling like when I was a kid.
He's Harry Potter.
Yeah,
He's being coy.
It's like on my forehead. There was like my parents got killed by this guy.
They made fun of you for about 7 years, and then this pretty influential book came out. That actually made me a lot cooler.
Yeah. In those times, I didn't feel like I was funny. I don't think that I found that part of myself until like middle school. And then I remember like watching Family Guy in 5th grade. I went on a Washington D.C. like trip for the safety patrol because I'm a rule following young one. So the reason I was never a class clown is because I was too respectful, and I always wanted the approval of adults.
You were writing down the jokes you would be making.
Yeah.
but giving them in
Turning
pamphlets
them in.
out to the kids after the class. Can you imagine when she said this thing about
Can we please harken back to when the teacher? I remember one thing that I used to do. So I went to Washington D.C. Because I was a safety patrol, which meant I was a hall monitor essentially,
Nice.
and the kids stayed in hotels by themselves. So it was like
What?
3 12-year-olds in a hotel room. There was like a chaperone next door, but they weren't staying in the room with us. And so I watched Adult Swim for like the first time.
Hell yes.
And I watched Family Guy, and I remember becoming obsessed with Family Guy, and then I just like wanted to do the voices of characters in Family Guy, and I started like just like mimicking all the things that made me laugh for other people.
Was that like the first joke? The first bit he would do was
Oh,
impersonation?
the first bit that I remember doing was like a Stewie Griffin impression.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
That I could probably like
Classic.
still summon
Wow.
it. It's like
So
my
cool.
face is gonna. Do you want it? Do you want to see if this happens? I don't know. Let's find out.
Oh god, there's a visual component that does not track audio wise.
How
Good
can
lord.
I translate that face?
There's a.
I'll just describe. He begins.
I'm Stewie Griffin.
Wait,
Your
keep
face
going.
looks like I drew it. It looks animated poorly.
I put your face in After Effects and had a really hard time with it, and that's what just happened on my export.
I don't know how the actual voice sounded, but that was the.
It was great.
That was the.
I like that you had to
impression.
take your glasses off to do that impression.
I had to remember like.
Stewie doesn't wear glasses, Laura.
I know.
Did you see the face when I made? Did you see how I shaped my face like a football? But yeah, so I just did stuff like that. Started like quoting stand up and just like getting really into deep into comedy, and then that became more and more a part of my identity. Just being a fan and always aspiring to do something more. And
those are like really important years.
Yeah.
Though. And that's like the value that I at least got out of school very early on. I was not a great student, as I said, dumb as a brick. But I was. I
was a good student. For those keeping track at home.
I was not academically.
Jordan, I'm the good guy. Jordan's the bad cop.
The villain, the bad boy,
Bad Boys.
sad boy, bad boy,
Bad Boys 2.0.
Bad
but
boys with a Z.
It's like school, at least at that age, when nobody really has a comedic lexicon yet, which is why you just like walk in and you just go like boogers, nobody laughs. Like, because what you're doing is establishing your dialect, kind of like when you're a baby and you just go like. Blah. Your dad goes like, Dada, he loves me. Like that's what kids are doing. They're just like, oh, he said something kind of weird. I guess that's funny. I see other people laughing. I guess I'm now going to decide that's funny. So yeah, doing impressions of stand-up shows to people with no frame of reference for what the hell you were talking about.
Yeah.
Like, you know when you're just driving in rush hour and like all the kids are like, yes.
Yeah.
Heading home to the missus.
Yeah.
LA
it's like
traffic, right? Friends in Cleveland.
the bits about my divorce didn't really go over well with 11-year-olds.
Especially with some of the kids.
Yeah. I remember the other thing about, and this is something that I don't think I've ever completely gotten over, but I'm much better at it now, which is I used to love telling people jokes and things, but I could never finish telling the joke without laughing. And so it would just be me like going like, you want to hear something funny? And it'd be like, no, I can't even. I just can't. But then I just get really close to a punchline, and then we just laugh, and then people just look at me with these blank stares because I just told them a bad story.
Yeah.
Because without a punchline, the joke is just a bad story. And
about something that didn't happen.
Yeah,
you told them a bad lie.
yeah, I just told them a bad lie and laughed at myself. I entertained myself instead of in front of strangers like some voyeuristic psychopath.
How about you two? Do you remember like the genesis of your comedic style, or like the moment you started to feel like you could do a little bit of a goof?
I remember being very mean-spirited as a kid, and my first memories of like comedy were like thinking that calling somebody like a butt face was cool. Probably because I probably got called that a lot by my older brother.
And you were like, well, I'm cool.
Yeah.
Surely
yeah.
that means something cool. He
I
can't be
thought I
insulting
was
me.
demanding respect by like making fun of other people, and it was very much like not good. I'm just remembering like me as a first grader, like calling out somebody and using like some edgy words like
butt face?
butt face or crap. Like that was
yeah,
hardcore.
super edgy.
Yeah,
Oh,
the C
Somebody's
word.
been watching Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
We went.
Yeah.
I feel like I went directly into like the worst words in my community. Like there was no.
I wasn't cool
time.
enough.
Like butt face wasn't even like that. Doesn't even register on the Richter scale.
That was honestly that was for butt faces. People that said
Yeah.
butt
toddler
face.
level.
Yeah.
We're in primary school here. But yeah, that's like kind of what I can remember. And then just developing like comedy more is like a wall, to be honest, of just like, hey, you're all alone. I'm like, of course I am. That's me. And like just some joke like that I can be like, oh, you can't go deeper. I am very alone. Type
I'm a
of
little
thing.
gnome. I can't make friends.
That was actually something that I wanted to ask. I thought it was maybe a little too early to dive into it, but I'm going to ask the hard-hitting questions. I'm curious.
Favorite parent, yeah.
I'm-
Super off topic, but sure we can get into that.
I'm curious. So I'm just not answering the comedy question because I just wasn't. I never found my humor. I was
She was too cool.
never
It's okay. Well, I
became
mean,
funny.
Tyler's answer was that he became a tyrant.
Yeah, my
Tyler.
nickname was literally Tyler the Terror by my
Wow.
entire family.
You were a Stewie Griffin of this.
I was
sounds
disliked a
You were
lot.
So I did musical theater from the time I was 8 growing up. So I feel like my sense of humor was developed within the theater community, which is very specific and explains why I like don't understand most references that are
Life
made
in general.
because I just did musical theater all the time. But the
Somebody just, like, drops a reference to the usual suspects, like, into the woods. It's time to go.
What do I look like, Sondheim?
that is exactly how it is in the world.
It's fun. You just have a different demo. You're still funny.
Exactly. But so I was going to ask actually, because I feel like it's sort of a kind of a common trope that like people use comedy as a defense. And I feel like I know both of you, and I know you to be like sensitive people with depth to you. You're not just like these.
It's working.
Yeah. So I'm
Bunson's fallen for it.
I'm curious if you've ever had that come up internally. Like you see yourself employing humor and you kind of have a pause of like, oh, this is a defense mechanism because I feel vulnerable or threatened or whatever it is. Like, is that something that's come up for either of you in your experience so far?
Big man, you want to take that one?
It's okay if it's not. I'm just curious.
So no, I think it's a
That's a very
good
good
question. I think humor for me, like to call it a defense mechanism, would really just be similar to how Tyler described it, a way to avoid criticism from others. Or it's like, oh, if I can make them laugh, then I know they like me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's really just protecting myself.
And if they like you, they can't hurt you. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, he makes me laugh. So it's like, it's the only thing, like, because I remember when I was very young on the playground, I found out that someone didn't like me. And this is just like speaks to my desire to like please people and make them like me as a child. I found out, and then I walked over to the person and I just asked him, it's like, oh, I heard you don't like me. What can I do to make you like me? Like I just I asked him up front. And so I think that thinking back then, humor was a way for me to like just verify, like oh, they definitely like me because I like make them laugh. But I definitely will have my peaks and valleys in terms of like feeling down and stuff like that, and I'm less able to access the humor myself, but it does help me to consume it, if that makes sense. Like if I watch comedy or if I watch something with a positive outlook, then it helps me. But my general like modus operandi is to like when I'm being goofy, it's just about everybody having a good time. Yeah.
It took me to like recent years to kind of develop that form of comedy. Like that's why I kind of enjoy hanging out with you and a lot of other people at the office. It's just like everybody is collaborating when they're making jokes. It's not I'm gonna 1+ you and up this and try to like be seen as cool. It's like we're all working for this common goal of making whatever this stupid thing we're talking about as funny as it can possibly be.
Joking together.
Yeah,
it's
a collaborative thing, and that's like super healthy in a lot of ways. But as you were talking, Jarvis, I had like a flashback.
Oh yeah,
back to like
totally unrelated.
yeah, it's weird.
Never been. But
I
hear it's great in the summer.
I was in Ho Chi Minh City and a man looked at me and he called me a butt face, and that doesn't even translate.
See,
It was actually the highest compliment.
In Vietnamese, it means king among gods.
and immediately I want to sing a song for Miss Saigon
Oh, there she is.
because that is my cultural context.
Incredible.
When I look at you, oh yeah.
Oh my god! I don't sell yourself short. That's actually an incredible skill.
Lauren is full
You
of
belong
golden
to a
nuggets.
cooler demographic, and you found yourself amongst the nerds.
Right. That's why
Exactly.
everyone is trying to emulate the behaviors and dress code of the folks that work on and off Broadway.
We need to
They're the
like
coolest.
send you back in time and make you friends with Lin-Manuel Miranda. And I think y'all
Plant
are
the seed.
y'all are gonna be great buddies.
But as I was like thinking back, I remember being friends with a really cool kid who had older brothers, and he was always friends with people from like other schools, because I went to a private school that was pretty boring and small, but he would hang out with like public schoolers, and we're like, ooh,
Very cool.
Wow.
he's cool. Chad's cool. His name wasn't Chad.
I was gonna say, there's no universe where his name is actually Chad.
There's actually no cool people named Chad. That's
I actually know a
universal
great
fact.
guy named Chad.
Don't believe it.
I respectfully disagree.
Chad, I love you. You play bass very well.
And Chad is also the lead singer of Nickelback. Anyways.
Oh, that evens it out.
Yeah.
You had a cool Chad, and then you had Nickelback Chad, and we're dead center yet again.
Right.
But yeah, I remember being
Chad Wars.
my new TV show, Chad.
Oh wait,
Wars.
Chadwick
Oh,
Boseman
Florida.
though, way up.
Chad for
Ooh.
short.
Chad
We could
Wick?
have a Chadcast.
Chad
So
Wick.
that's go to our Patreon, patreon.com/Mr. Feels for a Chadcast.
It's called Chatting Chad.
It's just a
Yes.
Chad chat.
Chat.
Hanging Chad.
Hanging Chad. Oh yeah, we spent a whole season talking about that.
We find like the worst Chads out there and just freaking.
This would have to be an exclusive Patreon show because we can't release this publicly.
Yeah, this is explicit right now. But this guy who I thought was really cool. We were good friends growing up, and he was a year older than me too. And we were
the coolest human
typically,
being on the
yeah,
planet. Oh
yeah,
my God.
exactly. And having that cool friend who's a year older, and then he hung out with me more than anybody else, like in his grade. And so I felt like really good. But then there was one instance where I don't even know why I'm mentioning this. I remember my parents saying that I couldn't hang out with this kid anymore.
Oh, forbidden love.
Because he had gotten his license recently, and apparently he chased cops. And I'm like, Mom, what?
Oh, sorry.
What does that mean?
You are friends with a really, really
What?
cool dog. He was always chasing
I'm
dogs
like, what is
and
that? How does
pissed
that?
everywhere.
What even is that? She's like, I heard that he chases.
You
Like
solved
he's just
mysteries
waiting
with
for
a
police
stoner?
officers and driving after them to tailgate them. I don't. And so I was upset.
But he
a
saved me
little.
when I was stuck in that well.
Yeah, but then I remember there was like a few months where I wasn't hanging out with him, and then like I got invited to a thing. Like we used to hang out like almost every other weekend or so, but this is like a year after that frequent hangouts, and I was with him. We were at a pool with other people, so a cool kid hangout
Very
type
cool,
of
yet
thing with
again.
a pool
Right.
with some of his friends who were female, and so I was like, whoa.
Whoa.
Cool game.
Where'd
up
you find 'em?
again. And I remember him like I said some dumb joke, probably a that's what she said joke, because that's the kid who I was in junior high.
Oh, yeah.
But
I mean, me too.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe you were cool.
yeah, but I remember him saying that like, oh man, like him laughing and being like, oh man, I missed you.
Wait, that's what she said. Like the
By
like
the
when we
she-sore?
when we tell you tell jokes about China's Prime Minister Xi Jinping.
That's what she said.
Wow.
The most niche,
Yeah, it's like,
tangential joke.
That's your
There's
equivalent of
one
musical
person-
theater.
Yeah, it's like
I know. Asian
like I-
international politics.
yeah, it's like I'm no Chairman Mao. That's what she said.
Mao Zedong, ding dong.
We could have 4 discrete podcasts happening.
Yeah.
One making reference to musical theater, one
man.
talking about
This is
international
chaos.
politics. I don't. Maybe you would just talk about Chad. You do chatting Chad, and I'll do like
Chad
I don't know,
cast.
Overwatch meta.
Oh
Something.
no, my brother does have an Overwatch podcast.
That's true.
So, where's your story going?
Okay,
I'm confused.
thank you, Laura,
Sorry,
for keeping us
sorry.
on track.
I thought of that Xi
this
Jinping
30
joke and I
second
couldn't let it
story.
go.
So you told a funny joke. He thought you were funny.
Yeah, and he was like, "Man, I've missed hanging out with you. Like, we need to do this."
shit.
So immediately in my mind, that connected. People will like me if I can make them laugh.
Got it.
And so that was like my goal to get in and to be in the in crowd ever since like junior high and high school. And so all my main goal was to just like relate to people through making them laugh.
Yeah, I mean, well,
Makes sense.
I'm convinced about this theory, by the way. I spouted off a lot. I believe we talked about it on Sad Boys a bunch of time. But when you're a child, the only thing you're trying to do, you are just molasses. You're just trying to stick to stuff. You're like, oh, I don't know what to be. I'm a hermit crab without a shell. Oh, I need an affectation, or I need something to assign myself to, or I need a thing that I love, or I need a group that I'm in, or I need an accent, or like I need something to distinguish me, which is why I chose to be English. But there was like a really classic one is, well, I'm the class clown, or I'm the cool jock, or I've seen these people on TV. I'm just going to emulate whatever that is. And so when the world tells you what you're supposed to be, your immediate instinct is, oh, I just have to assign all of those
Yeah.
traits to myself. Like, I kind of like motorcycles. I'm just gonna buy a leather jacket and grease my hair. Like, it's close enough, and I need something desperately.
I made a The Office reference and it killed, and so I watched every episode within 2 weeks.
I had not seen the show myself. I just said Michael Scott out loud.
Michael! Killed every time.
Yeah, that was me with The Simpsons.
Yeah, but Jarvis, you said something about just like using comedy as a way to like make people like you. And so
Yeah.
like there's very good ways that we've seen in our personal relationships of how it's collaborative and it brings people together on several different layers, like emotionally, like relationally and practically.
Yeah.
But like it can also come from a place that's very broken. And do you want to
Right.
just kind of talk about your experience with using comedy, maybe not from the healthiest of places?
Yeah, I think comedy is like a double-edged sword, right? Because typically what it is you're observing something about the world and like making a commentary, and oftentimes what you're pointing out about the world is something that everyone else knows, like based on their experience, and why they laugh is that they go, "Oh yeah, no, that is the thing. That's what life is like." You know what I mean?
He knows the rules.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I don't often reflect myself on my own experience, but wow, now that someone's pointed it out, it's like a magic trick. It's like someone going, and now, there's a bunny in my hat, and it's like, how did he do that? And it's like, there is a bunny in his hat. And because of like that kind of way of pointing out things about the world, it can be it can turn on yourself, and you oftentimes are like, yourself better than anyone else. So just as you can make observations about the world, it's like Mr. Smith, like he's always making dad jokes, and it's like on Halloween you'll dress up as Mr. Smith and you'll say, "Oh, do you like my haircut? I got them all cut, actually." And it's like, all right, I get it. Jarvis is Mr. Smith for Halloween.
Yeah.
Like he makes that
white socks and sandals.
Yeah. And in a very similar way, I make observations about like, yeah, Mr. Smith. I can make observations about myself and call out these things that are hyperbole at the end of the day. Like a lot of times jokes are like they're like based in truth and in hyperbole, and it's very easy to hyperbolize your own experience, positive or negative. And I think that I've been guilty of, like, in times of the depths, in times of turmoil, I've been guilty of like making my own like mental well-being worse by catastrophizing.
How so?
Just by taking like something that's bad or something that's negative and then like going, well, this just means like it's just like the same way that you analyze the world, you can just hyperanalyze your own like life. It's like, oh well, because I got a bad grade on this test, that means I'll never get a good grade here, which means I'll never get to college, which means I'm a failure and no one will love me.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it's
And
like
if you're hyperanalyzing everything in a 360-degree radius, then you're always going to glob onto the things that inform biases you already have. And if one of those biases is everything's going to fall apart and I suck and everyone hates me, somebody just goes like, "You what? No, oh my god, everybody hates me. Did everybody said it? Fuck."
Yeah.
or very similarly
It's
to
a
how
Friday
like,
night for me.
That's just usually me texting you.
similarly to how I might say, oh yeah, Mr. Smith is always making the bad jokes. I'm going to be the first to notice my own behaviors and the first to call myself out for better or for worse when I do stuff. So it'll be like, I don't feel really good about that thing I said today. And then someone talks to you about it later and you're like, oh, fuck, I knew it. It's like, it's confirming your like worst suspicions about yourself.
It's WebMD syndrome, right?
Yeah.
I have a headache. Gonna check this website. Could just be that I'm dehydrated, but I really don't want it to be that I'm dying, so I think I'm dying.
Yeah. So yeah, I just think the hyper analysis can be a double-edged sword.
Yeah. And Jordan, one thing I wanted to talk to you about was just we get to this point where we've gotten so used to using comedy growing up to make people like us, or because we really enjoy it and it's become like a passion of ours, or for all these different reasons, but we tend to get good at it when it's something that we care about a lot and use a lot. That makes it really easy for us to deflect.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I know that like I essentially made like a pact with myself like a year or two ago that was just like, why am I not transparent about things in general? Why do I not only like have
You're not a ghost.
I'm very opaque. Why can't I go through this wall right now? I'm very upset.
We had packed.
It was me and Danny Phantom just hashing it out in the room.
Me and DP.
But yeah, it was just like I was looking back and recalling that like not only do I have walls for whenever somebody asks me a personal question, I know how to deflect it immediately, but I have like walls behind walls into like I've thought about what would happen if they were to like pry further and how I would address that comment, and then how I would just use hyperbole and being like, oh, because I'm incredibly alone. Haha. And then just like move on. And so I got really good, also helped being around peers who weren't like the sharpest, and just because I felt like I had a quicker wit that I could just talk and joke around them to make nobody like think that I wasn't cool, which just ended up isolating me from everybody. So like I was thinking I was a loser, so I made myself a loser. So great idea. Not. But I was just wondering,
there's a control in like owning the narrative, right? You
Yeah.
tell yourself, well, you think I'm a loser, I'm gonna play it up, and little do you know, I'm laughing at you behind my back. What's that? You still think I'm a loser?
Yeah.
Regardless of
I
that,
know.
because you're a child and you don't give a shit what I think. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, I'm just interested to see how that aspect has played out, not only through like growing up, but even now. Do you like, can you remember frequently or just feel yourself like currently like using that as a device to deflect?
1000%. Yeah. I, funnily enough, have made a similar pact, not with Danny Phantom, but I made a pact with myself right before I moved here. It'll be 3 years this October that I've lived in the US.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
you too, man.
it took work for you because you're not from here.
No, you're good.
So-
You're doing it so much longer than me. You're doing so good.
You're right. I'm better than you. Thanks.
But I, when I was growing up, particularly after I hit high school, and it's just such a caustic environment that you cling to whatever you're good at and you use whatever defense mechanisms you can at all moments. That's why bullies get bullier. That's why nerds get nerdier. It's why, you know, everybody just plays more to that affectation. And for me, that was most class clown, most I don't care what you think of me. I'm just joking around, I'm just playing. I don't have any feelings, blah, 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 blah. That was maximum Jordan at that time. As I get older, every single year, I try harder. It's always included somewhere in my many unchased New Year resolutions. There's always one that's just like, I'm just going to try and be more sincere. And I get better every year. Me compared to my last year of college compared to my first year in the US, which is only about 6 months apart. Only about 45 years apart.
Went to med school.
Yeah. But like only a small break there is unrecognizable. And mainly it was being in SF and around people that value sincerity. Like it's just not a thing outside of my mum that I was raised around really, really valuing. So actually today, I won't name any names for obvious reasons, but there was a friend of ours that was seeming kind of down.
Dan Smith.
She'd had, oh, jeez. We're not going to edit this. But she was seeming really down, Dan. And as a result, like 15 possible thoughts went through my mind, like 15 possible things I could say or ways I could be. I was like, could I make a joke of it? Could I try and devalue the thing that's upsetting her by putting it on like a ludicrously high pedestal? Could I do a bit around it? Could I try and distract her with a joke? And instead I just said like, hey, you're one of my favorite people ever. And we just had a hug. And that provided so much more value for far fewer brain calories. It just wasn't necessary. But that's where my brain defaults. And every now and then, I mean, even when I was talking about like, I'm not dumb as a brick. I just didn't like school. And so I didn't try and I hated being there and I never did any of my homework. But it's easier for me to immediately translate that via the dialect of self-parody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's also a tactic too for like getting people on your side. It's like, oh, I'm not full of myself. Look, I can make all these jokes about me.
Yeah.
Don't you like how I'm charming because I'm not actually bad at any of the things that I'm saying I'm bad at, but like, oh, I'm so likable.
Chad, I know you could choose any of these nerds to hang out with, but I'm the one that just things bounce off me. Couldn't care less. Say what you want. Push me in the pool. Please don't. Actually, just a quick question to all of you. What do you think? It sounds like in your case, Jarvis, it was school. And in Tyler's case, it was specifically Chad or people in that environment.
The worst.
But what was the environment where your comedy started getting validated? Because for me, it was I wanted to be an adult my whole life. I just wanted to be grown up. And my mum would invite people around to the house. I would make jokes, and they would laugh. And I'd be like, yes, I'm grown up. This is it. This is what grown ups do. They joke about stuff, and I don't really get the joke, but people are laughing when I do stuff. Do you have an equivalent of that, like a demographic? That,
Like, when did people validate me, or when did I feel like
who
personal?
validated you?
Yeah.
Who was like, hey, you got the stuff, kid.
Yeah, honestly, it was whenever I made a "that's what she said" joke. So I never stopped.
Might still be the case.
I know.
Yeah.
That's what she said. That was
Oh, nice.
yes.
I did
Theater
it!
kids.
Dude, Laura's funny, man. Wait, when are we hanging with Laura? We immediately start validating.
Do that Miss Saigon thing again. You know, for me it definitely was school, but one thing I was thinking about recently is like, I think now I only think that I'm funny because other people tell me that I am.
You're funny, Jarvis.
But no. But
In the game.
So I would have thought, like, if I maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, if you would ask me like, are you funny? It's like, I mean, I try. I'm like, I get by or whatever. And I thought that I felt that way because no one had ever like validated that I was funny or told me that I was funny.
Sure.
And then I realized when I was looking back on my old Facebook messages, people were telling me like from a very early age that I was funny, and I never internalized it. And I think it's because I would deflect.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Like, no, I don't think anybody's ever said, you're funny, and I've gone, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Because that's what I'm trying to do.
Which actually, in retrospect, would be the
hilarious.
funniest thing you could do. Yes.
Just thanks and walk away.
I do a thing now where I will just say, yes, I'm technically a professional comedian. Back when I was like doing improv, where the shows were like $5.
That's true.
Yes.
We would see none of the revenue because it would just go to our coach. But technically,
Legally speaking,
I'm a professional.
I'll go. I again never became funny, but
You got to stop cracking us up with this line because it's too effective.
validated.
It's not
brand
very
the line.
believable when you say that you're not funny and then we all laugh.
I actually think so. Like, I don't think of myself as a comedian, but I don't have any moments of like being the class clown or really trying to crack people up to connect with them. I think that not always, but often go the route of like digging in really deep to what's going on with people emotionally as the way that I connect with them.
And they're deflecting comedically. Like,
yeah.
please, Jesus.
Yeah.
I end up in all these comedian circles.
And everyone just ends up crying at the end of the night. I don't really know. But I remember, like, I have an older sister who's 7 years older than me.
Oh, wow.
And she and I hung out a lot. And I think that we developed this kind of like weird sense of humor. And some of the times I remember as a kid laughing the hardest was when I was with her. So I think, more than like having this moment of, I don't know, this like end goal with comedy, I think a lot of my sense of humor was informed by my interactions with my sister.
Yeah.
Did she have like friends that would also validate it? Would you like go in a room, she's having a slumber party and you crack wise and they're like, oh shit, nice.
No, not really. It was really just like she and I had a lot of inside jokes. Like, we'd be like, monkeys. And we'd like just cry. We still that one still cracks us up.
That is funny.
I can't believe
It's really funny.
Wow.
It's just like,
example.
you can't surprise me like that. You can't just say monkeys like just out of the blue.
I've told you this.
I can't.
That won't work.
Can we stop the podcast? Holy fuck. Monkeys. Oh my god.
One thing that I wanted to touch on in this episode is just
That's what she said.
all right.
I
Let's
know
take
you
a
name your
moment
episode
of-
by guest, but that would be the title of the episode.
Wait, the title is one thing I wanted to touch on. Haha, that's what she said.
and then it has
It'll be
a
an
smirk
ellipses.
emoji.
But just like the Slack code for it, 'cause it's not going to go. It's just like colon, smirk, colon.
Man.
Hey, just want to take a really quick break to ask for a little favor. We have no advertisers for the show, and we'd like to keep it that way for the foreseeable future. But Laura and I really suck at marketing. So if you could help us out and pull out your phone if you're able to right now, and just shoot a quick text to somebody who you think might be interested in this episode of Mr. Feels, or maybe just Mr. Feels the podcast. You can just easily say something like, hey, I really enjoyed this podcast, if you did, and I think that you might too, so check it out. That's pretty much it. It's really helpful and useful to us as we're growing, and it also helps further our mission to get rid of the stigma surrounding mental health. All right, let's get back into the show. So I guess the question would be, like, what is your stance on what makes good comedy good and what makes something bad comedy or not okay?
Oh, yikes.
When you say bad comedy, can I just clarify? I think
Yes,
What-
please.
you mean, do you mean bad comedy like jokes that aren't funny, or do you mean bad comedy as in joking about things that really should be off the table for?
Yeah, I mean, joke for an example
Yeah.
to be like suicide. Am I right? No.
Right.
Well, I mean,
So-
that's funny. You think you are funny? That was so good.
So, what you're saying is that like there are a lot of topics that, when joked about, can be viewed as tasteless,
Tasteless.
and for others, they can be viewed as biting, as commentary, as like connecting. Right?
Tasty.
Yeah, something that can hurt
tasty.
other people.
Yeah. And the difference, I think, is in understanding like what connects, like what can connect those people. It's like I always bring it back to like punching up versus punching down. It's like, who is at the butt of this joke?
Yeah.
If it's like we're all in this together, if that's the vibe, then typically it like feels more okay than when you're alienating someone and you're pointing out someone who is different. So for example, I'll give an example that's like
Let's make fun of Chad.
You can use me.
so no. If you're
Laura's
like
dating a Chad.
so one thing that really bugged me in like the early 2000s in like a lot of comedy is that little people were like the butt of the joke.
Right.
And it was just like a thing. It was in
there.
it's just the
If
fact
they
that
were
they were
present, and that's
if they were
funny.
present, then that was the joke. It was just
Right.
like you would put someone in frame and then people would just be like and it's just like, so that's punching down. And it's like we had the biggest block, but we had Austin Powers doing this, like, and that is bad comedy, right?
Mhm.
Like, because it serves people who are outside of the group that is the butt of the joke
Yeah.
at the expense of the people who are the
Both
butt.
morally and objectively. Bad comedy.
Exactly.
And this shouldn't be a factor, but it's also not funny enough to justify it. It's
Right,
an
right.
easy punch down.
It's throwing someone else under the bus because they can't speak up for themselves otherwise, or they're, because they don't have that elevated voice, right? Like they're not in the power positions of like the Hollywood executives, or they're not giving the comedy special, right? Whereas if you're like Vern Troyer, who played Mini-Me, and like Austin Powers, who recently passed away actually, so rest in peace, Vern Troyer, and you're warming up a crowd and you're doing bits and you're self-deprecating and maybe you're like speaking on behalf of like your own experience, that's a completely different thing, right?
Yeah.
It's as simple as like if the fat guy jokes about being fat, then it's different than the skinny guy joking about fat people.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And it's very tied to like knowing your audience as well. So like I would make very dark jokes with friends in like private households, maybe like we had Kyle on the episode of With Anxiety. I think it was like our second episode, and I've made like some of the most dark jokes about like having like suicide notes and like using that in comedy because both Kyle and I have been at that point, and so like we have a context that makes that funny to us, whereas it's not something that is necessarily funny like to a broader audience.
And comedy. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. It probably wouldn't be funny to you if somebody who you knew had never experienced depression made a joke about suicide.
So
Yeah,
I-
no,
To you.
yeah, that would make me a little upset.
Right.
I want to hear Jordan's opinion on this, but the last thing I'll add is that you hit on a really important thing, Tyler, which is if you were to make that joke with Kyle in public, it's different than making it in private because now you're exposing other people
Yeah.
to this, and you can have an impact on other people who lack the context.
Yeah.
And the cost of them getting the wrong idea is like too high
Yeah.
to like put that beyond
That's why comedy and stand-up comedians are some of the main proponents in driving social change, because essentially they're philosophers and able to make these hard ideas laughable and to bring them into light in a way that makes you think.
Comedy and levity is the forefront of normalization. That's
Yeah.
the first thing that starts to
Explain
normalize.
that. I agreed with it immediately, but I have no idea what I'm agreeing with.
I was just reading from an article.
You use big words and I'm like, I'm
No,
smart.
Jordan is just, he has his laptop out and he's reading the New York Times.
July 6th.
Thesaurus.com.
I just go down to the comments. But yeah, like, so if you basically observe any major social movement, be it something related to civil rights or be it related to surrogacy or whatever, just anything related to a disenfranchised people that over time found comfort and enfranchisement to some degree, the first place you see the acknowledgement is in comedy. Often like many, many, many years before it even becomes a conversation. Like the most progressive comedians were doing bits about how absurd it is that gay marriage is illegal in like the mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, have you ever noticed how this is completely insane? And it's because that was considered progressive and
like legalizing weed and just all these different issues that are now
it's
like,
exactly
normalized.
the same kind of philosophy, just applied like in different contemporary settings. And for that reason, I mean, to jump off of what Jarvis was saying about what does or does not make tasteless comedy, the ultimate arbiter is the audience. I mean, that's also what makes good or bad comedy. Like, you can think your joke is spectacular. You could have worked hours on it, perfectly paced out the way you phrase it, know what kind of pacing you're going to be doing on the stage. You slick back your hair as you do the punchline, and it doesn't land. You don't get to just say that they didn't get it. Your joke is now bad because people didn't laugh.
So not only does the audience make comedy, but broadly, an audience in a community makes society, and like you just can't have comedy is a collective experience of a society or it's a commentary on society, so like it just doesn't exist in a vacuum. It like that's why some comedy doesn't translate across languages and stuff. It's just like so tied into like the culture and the way it is to be like as a human that it can't exist without that context.
Yeah, I would specify that not necessarily like the audience makes the comedy. It's the response. Is that what you're getting at? So you can have a really bad joke, but have good intentions of like the butt of this joke or the point of this joke is not what I'm saying specifically is funny, but it's to get somebody to think about this issue in a deeper way. And by using it in a way that sounds like completely outrageous and unacceptable, it's making people think, hey, that's not good. And it's like, yeah, that's the point. You're supposed to think that it's not good.
And that's the hard part.
It's so difficult.
Identifying a theme you want to express and technically expressing it, but people not connecting with it, is you failing at the thing you try to do. It'd be like if you say, I am an Olympic swimmer, and the Olympics are happening in Beijing, and you go to your local pool and you just swim back and forth. You can think you're an Olympic swimmer as much as you want, but unless the rest of the world acknowledges it, you and them are never going to agree that you're an Olympic swimmer.
And you can be successful with one portion of an audience and very unsuccessful with the other. Like every comedian has so much judgment that of just people who have misunderstood what they're trying to do or think that they've understood what they're trying to do and still don't like it.
I just have a different sense of humor.
Altogether.
I do want to add the caveat that it's not necessary that you have a big audience, right? I want to make sure I'm not communicating that. It can literally just be one other person, but I would apply the exact same philosophy to whether or not something is tasteless. If you are hanging out with somebody and you're making jokes that make them uncomfortable and they don't laugh, you're not making a joke. You're just saying a thing that you agree with and they don't. Like at a really, really high level, I am of the mindset that theoretically nothing is off the table for comedy. As I say, comedy is very progressive by nature, and we should push the boundaries, and we don't necessarily want to put pins in place that make people hesitate from doing that. But if you're shooting a comedy special and you are a fully abled white man and your bit is about transgender disabled people, maybe don't do the bit.
Or about saying the N-word.
It's like it's not for you,
Yeah.
and you're not doing it for them.
Yeah.
So
Right.
your bit, your thesis is just falling into the vacuum.
Yeah.
And you're like, right? Well,
Mhm.
shit. It's for no one.
I think the other thing that defines tasteless comedy is like, even if it's comfortable for you and the other person, if it's just two people,
Mhm.
you have to be cognizant of the impact that your like joking about something will have on the other person,
Yeah.
even if it's like not overtly obvious. Like
Yeah.
if I belittle, I don't know, suicide to someone who I don't know was like contemplating it, then
Mhm.
that could have an effect on them that's
Yeah.
negative, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I think that was interesting that came out of your discussion just now was that comedy can have this effect where comedy's like brings progressive issues to the forefront and is like often the first to discuss these things. And in that way, comedy is like a Trojan horse, right?
Mm.
Because you trick someone. If someone laughs, that's a physiological response that is indicative of truth almost.
Mm.
Like if
Yeah.
you laugh at something, you found truth in that.
Mhm.
Mm.
And if I can get you to see the hypocrisy of like the way transgender people are treated versus like other people, then now I've incepted your brain with this concept, and you, because you laughed at it, believe it to be true, at least in this moment, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I have an example that I'd like us to react to.
Kids react to
Yeah.
offensive comedy.
Sad boys react.
I
There-
love this.
one of my favorite comedians, not necessarily my favorite comedian, but just the style in which he uses comedy.
I mean, he's one of my favorite comedians.
yeah,
Like
but-
he is far and away in my top 4. I
he's
think.
incredible. So
I don't want to spoil a name.
should we say who it is rather than just say
My best friend Bo Burnham. He is my favorite artist
Yeah.
of any
Bo
art of
Burnham?
any
Yeah,
discipline.
he is in my like top 5 artists for sure. Easy.
He's YouTube OG too. But this video, I remember showing my friend, I'm like, I'm going to show him Bo Burnham because I think Bo Burnham's hilarious. And so like I looked up a video, and so I just clicked this video, and it's about him making a bouncy, upbeat song about suicide. And I'm like, I immediately did not like it at all. I'm like, Bo Burnham, you betrayed me, like type
wow.
of feeling. And so like warning,
Trigger warning.
so like trigger warning, essentially, this song is lighthearted and will talk about suicide in a way that some people might not like, and that's okay. So I'm just gonna play it, and then we can give thoughts afterwards. It was very offensive to me, and then I kind of thought about it a little bit.
Have you ever felt sad or lonely? Have you ever felt 2 feet tall? Have you ever thought, man, if only I was anybody else at all? They like to kick you when times get rough, and you give your all, but it's not enough, and sticks and stones might break your bones, but words can break your heart. But if you don't know where to go, I'll show you where to start. Kill yourself. It'll only take a minute, and you'll be happy that you did it. Just go over to your oven and shove your head in it. Kill yourself. Really, you should do it. There's really nothing to it. Just grab a mug and chug a cup of lighter fluid. Okay, now I feel like you pulled back. Maybe it's on account of the fact that I'm telling you to kill yourself over and over again. I'm just trying to make a simple point that life's toughest problems don't have simple answers. You shouldn't just be brave. You shouldn't just roar. You shouldn't kill yourself. But I understand that it's a sensitive subject, and you're probably just hearing me say that, and I've dealt with, I don't want to be incensed. Look, I sound unempathetic, I sound mean and rude. Suicide is an epidemic, and I don't want to be misconstrued. Signs of depression go overlooked. So if you're depressed, then you need to book a therapy session. Talk about your depression and let a professional hear it. But if you search for moral wisdom in Katy Perry's lyrics, then kill yourself. It won't be painful if you are able to give a little kiss to an oncoming oncoming train, you'll kill yourself. It's over, mullet. There's a trigger, pull it. Get it through your head, it being a bullet. Stick your tongue in a plug. Suck a pipe of exhaust. Make some toast in the tub. Nail yourself to a cross. Hold your breath till it's gone. Drink a gallon of mace. Be gay in Iran. Let Oprah sit on your face. Jump off of a bridge. Skinny dip in a flood. Skydive attached to a fridge. Drink a Haitian guy's blood. Bring it to the zoo. Give the tiger a shove. Eat a Phillips head screw. Marry Courtney Love.
Okay, the last line is really good.
Oh yeah, I actually feel equipped to deconstruct this.
I had some real church laughter going on in that screening. So full transparency, that was the second song I ever learned on piano.
Hey, you're singing along to everything.
That says a lot about you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually a perfect, before we dive into the meat of the conversation, this is a perfect analog to exactly what we were saying about what can be considered offensive and who is the arbiter and whether or not it is offensive. Because I was not offended by the song, and I thought it sounded nice, and it's very funny. So I learned it on piano. The issue is that I don't get to now sit here, and you can, Tyler, Laura, Jarvis, you can come at me and say, I think that's offensive. I think it's inappropriate to play that amongst company, for example. I don't then get to say, but no, I like it. I like the song.
Yeah.
I don't take my video games away. Like,
Yeah, it's like you can't invalidate the feelings of others.
I don't get to be the
Yeah.
final word on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And maybe, if somebody is going to be the final word, it should be somebody that has struggled with an issue like that. But again, then who am I I'm not the arbiter of who gets to have felt that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You don't,
yeah.
you, whoever you are, don't get to tell somebody else if they have experience and you have not, whether or not they should feel X thing.
Right.
Do you know? I actually have a question. Do you know if Bo has had has he ever publicly talked about mental health?
Yeah, I think he's talked
Yeah.
about his
Yeah.
depression and
Extensively, yeah.
he's had
Yeah.
suicidal thoughts and has talked
There's
about
a very
it. at large.
offhand reference in the song.
Yeah.
Where in his little ad hoc moment where he's like,
Uh-huh.
I don't want to make
Stuttering.
it, but I've struggled with, and then he just dumps straight back into the song.
Got it.
This is an interesting, I'm such a big Bo Burnham fan. There's an interesting aside after the song where it clearly reads like, I am so proud of this thing I made, and it's very funny, but it's 10% over what I personally am comfortable with, so I'm just going to give it a little extra flavor. Like, his shows are filled with, wow, he really just said that and moved on and kept character and played up to his I don't give a shit persona. He breaks a couple times in this special and references that song and says, like, it depends on which recording you're watching, but in the Netflix one, there's a specific moment right after he does the song where he just goes, I forget what the aside is, but he literally just references, like, don't kill yourself. If that is happening, go and get help. And, like, it's clear that he's a tad uncomfortable with it as well.
Yeah. I just wanted to walk through what was happening there. Like I can explain.
go
I think
for
I
it.
can explain why that's funny.
Go for it. Let's
So-
deconstruct it because
so-
we all know breaking a joke down to
That's when
every
it gets
individual part
funniest,
is so funny.
Well, no, I
No,
don't,
but genuinely,
I don't know.
this
but,
is this
it's
is a good conversation.
Yeah,
I want
yeah,
you to have it.
Because we keep talking about we were just talking about comedy in the abstract for a lot, and so now we have
No, this is
actual-
actually one of my favorite
yeah,
things.
yeah.
Please
So on
go.
the surface level, it's a song about encouraging you to kill yourself, which, if you just took that and you put that in a article headline or put that on Fox News or something,
Sure.
it's not going to hold up. Moms are going to get upset, right? There's
1
gonna-
million of them are going to be
Yeah,
furious.
There's going to be a protest about it, but it's an exercise in nuance, right? Because it is a commentary, and not only is it a commentary, the song itself, that's the second dimension of the song, but there's another dimension of the song that is the fact that it's being performed in front of a crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably another dimension there too, but when I watch that, I hear, as someone who's had suicidal thoughts, right? What I hear is a call out of a silly thing that your brain does logically. I know that when I get to that point, it is not a rational place to be, right? If you then parody a line of irrational thought from a rational context, you see how silly the irrational thing is. So it's A plus B. Oh, I guess I should kill myself. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Right? It's just it clearly doesn't lead there.
Yeah.
And in the fact that he's putting it there is part of the commentary. And another part is that he is aware of the effect
Yeah.
that it's going to have on the audience to make such a statement.
Yeah,
And
the
that-
You know what I
surprise
mean?
effect.
That's where the joke lives.
Shock
the
factor
the
value.
joke, as you said, at a superficial level is suicide, but it's not really a joke about suicide. It's a joke about how strangely reverent suicide is held in the minds of an audience.
Yeah.
And the second you say, kill yourself, the audience reels back, and then
Yeah.
you pull them in with a fun melody, and then you push them back out by saying it
Yeah.
again. It's about that ebb and flow.
Yeah.
And there's actually like 5 topics that would fit neatly
Yeah,
inside of
I
there.
agree, and that's like, and we can't say any of them because we can't speak from that place. But neither could Bo, which is why he told
Yeah.
it from a perspective that he could like
Yeah.
operate within,
Yeah.
while still not actually, in my view, without
The
like, and you know, you would have a different perspective here, obviously, because you had a different feeling when you first watched the song. But in my perspective as an audience member, not being alienated by the song, other than the initial like shock factor,
Yeah.
and then like understanding what it is, and comedy is uncomfortable, so it like plays with the ratio of
Yeah.
like sitting with like an uncomfortable thought or
Tyler
topic.
and Laura, what were your initial reactions? Is that the first time you've ever heard
That's
of
the
it?
first time I ever saw this.
Nice.
I did not prepare for this.
The
Episode.
special is just that song 5 times, which is bizarre. There's no intro, no outro. The
Yeah.
lights go off. He falls asleep on the grand piano.
yeah, Laura, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I thought it was hilarious. I don't think that I've I don't think that I've ever had suicidal thoughts. Like I've experienced clearly, I mean, I've talked about this a lot on the podcast. Like I've experienced pretty deep depression. And so I feel like
Is that like when the voice in your head is like, kill yourself?
Yo, what up?
Hey girl.
yes, and then
Hey,
Batman
Laura.
comes and tells me.
It's me, Bruce.
So like
you
I've
ain't doing so good.
I've experienced deep depression, so like I just gonna keep going. I told you I'm gonna
Depression.
yeah, I mean, I think so. Right. So I've experienced depression, and definitely, like, if I were in the middle of an episode and saw that, I might respond very differently than I am responding right now, recording a podcast with 3 friends, with a cat on my lap and some champagne. But yeah, I just think it's really what Jarvis said, that like it's clear that he comes. I mean, 2 lines into that song, I was like, oh well, this guy has definitely had experience with this.
Before he even started speaking, you could tell by his
Yeah.
hair in his face. He's like,
Maybe-
yeah, this kid.
Yeah, maybe it was
Stereotypical.
right. Maybe it was
Well, if you
written
see
on
him in
piano.
person, he's 6'5".
Oh, yeah, he's huge.
and he
Wow.
like he's just like he just like is like this guy.
He's the epitome of
Right.
the awkward
Yeah,
internet kid.
The grand piano gives you the
With
best
depression.
possible posture for that aesthetic. Big hunch over. Like,
By the way, real quick, Bo Burnham has a movie coming out called 8th Grade, and it's incredible.
Sponsored?
No, it's I saw a screening of the movie with Bo Burnham there.
Okay.
He's
All
directed-
right.
Bo, if you'd like to come on
Alright.
our podcast, we would love to have you.
Bo, if you'd like
Yeah.
to come on my podcast,
Hey, Bo.
I host a podcast called Mr. Feels with my good friend.
My podcast is
Called Happy
Chad
Girls.
Chats.
Bunsen burner.
What Chad do you want to hang?
So
Anyways.
if you play Overwatch, you're more than welcome to come on my new show.
yeah, so I think like immediately upon seeing it, I was considering that he was probably coming from an experiential perspective, and I found it funny. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's
Like-
the verdict, though? Is it you big thumbs up, big thumbs down, something in the middle?
Probably something in the middle.
Hmm. Yeah.
I really liked. Like I thought it was really funny. I definitely. Okay, so what I think was funny about it is that it was presenting the solution of suicide as this flippant, easy solution to
Yeah.
a multitude of things that, like, it's clearly not the solution. And because of the way that he presented it sarcastically as like, oh, well, shit's hard, just do this one super simple thing. It was like
Yeah.
almost mocking the cultural conversation around suicide as being an easy out.
Yeah, even on the granular level of using this such a bouncy major scale staccato like version, so like every aspect of this song was attributing to the comedic effect that he was trying to bring.
Right.
And one of my favorite aspects of comedy, especially stand-up and performative stand-up, such as Bo's comedy, is they have to play acrobatics with their words to address one audience differently from another. So they're telling like 3 jokes kind of at once. So it's like, here, let me talk to my people who have experienced depression. I'm going to make light of it this way. And then I'm also talking to the people who have no experience by making this such an outlandish idea to be like, whoa, that's so like different people groups are reacting differently and they're taking this into account. Comedians are modern day philosophers who like to laugh and are more depressed, or not more depressed. Nietzsche was pretty depressed.
Kind of famously. Kind of his thing.
You point out a really good thing, which is that the layers that exist in that performance do serve to engage many types of audiences the entire time without like, if it was just for people who had experienced depression, not everyone who watches Bo Burnham is going to have that, right? And so he wants to keep all those people engaged, and I think that speaks to the power also of the art, because he's able to now engage people who haven't had an experience, and like in a very strange way, in a very absurd way, because this is also like the point of this is like very absurdist, right? Like, and that's the point too, but. Similar to your point earlier, Tyler, about, well, I guess who said the thing about explaining complex ideas? Was it like
if it was
all of
really smart and funny, it was probably me.
Me.
Yeah, well,
It's probably
anyway,
us
earlier
together.
I said this thing.
It's really
To
good,
be or not to be.
thought-provoking and hilarious.
But yeah, that is a way. I think I did actually say this. Of like,
Who is that funny guy earlier? His name started
that
with
really
the
smart
jar.
thing?
It sounded handsome.
but for those who hadn't had a similar experience, it put the concept in their mind in a way that was accessible to them, and in a way that is like, oh, now I in a small way know someone who's experienced this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think one of the keys to this song is like, without the second verse, this wouldn't have been funny in a productive way. Like, if you were very heady and could like deconstruct it and realize all these things that are subconscious and not expressly talked about, like without the verse 2, this is what it says. I sound unempathetic. I sound mean and rude. Suicide is an epidemic, and I don't want to be misconstrued. Signs of depression go overlooked. So if you're depressed, then you need to book a therapy session, talk about your depression. Let a professional hear it. But if you search for moral wisdom from Katy Perry's lyrics, then... And then he goes back into the song.
And
So
that
very
is-
clever.
That's the point in the song. That's basically as far as Bo can go into sincerity,
Yes.
and then pulls you back into the absurd so hard.
Yes.
Like if maybe this was at some other point in the song, and he was just like, "And you listen to Katy Perry's lyrics, kill
Yeah.
yourself." Haha, that's like not quite as heavy, but because he pushes all the way to, "Hey, we're gonna put the song on pause for just a minute, for real. If you're like listening and you're having some trouble, seek help. All right. Do you listen to Katy Perry though? Fucking kill yourself." And then he runs all the way back to home base. You're like, yes.
He's effectively hitting both poles of the comedy spectrum, just punching them.
He hit the ball and caught it. It was incredible.
I agree with Jordan's assessment, and I also would say that it's like, to me, not even that productive to split out part of the art, because it was architected as, he didn't write the first verse and then go, you know, like he tries it out and it's like, this isn't working. Like he probably had what he set out to say at the very beginning, right?
Well, that's what's interesting about the entire format of it being a comedy special, not a song release. Viewing the special in isolation, or viewing the video specifically in isolation, also discredits a lot of the setup. This is not a criticism. That's just the thing we did. But Laura, it's interesting that you inferred from his posture and his aesthetic and his lighting and his tone and his singing that, okay, this is somebody that struggled with depression and is this type of personality.
Right.
That's something that Bo sets up for inference for the entire first portion of the show. This show, I think, comes in about like 1/3 of the way through. It's like, oh, I get it. I see what you're playing at. And the last track in the show, the last performance, is long form. You think you know me, you don't know me. That's the theme of the final track is, you're a fan of me, you don't actually know who I am. Don't assume that I feel X, Y, and Z. It's like, that's the entire thesis.
That's the other layer. I was like searching for the other layer of this piece, and it's that all of Bo's performance art exists in this very meta like world of Bo is commenting on performance as a concept in his art. Like
Yeah.
when Bo is on screen in his like ever since after he's like left YouTube more progressively like since then, he is commenting on the absurdity of a person getting on stage and performing in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
And he's subverting that and playing with that throughout all of his specials. So what Jordan's getting at is that we're seeing a segment of that which lacks all of the setup or context.
Yeah.
And still stands on
Still works.
No, it
Yeah.
still stands
So
on
works.
the three layers. But then
So
when you look
good.
at it as a whole, it is like a treatise on performance.
Yeah.
Which you don't get when you see like, oh, it's like a song about killing yourself. It's like, no, this is actually this broader commentary on
Yeah.
celebrity.
Yeah.
And he has to think so deeply about these things to make it such a cohesive work of art, just so that it can like hit that one person who's not too smart and who just like watches this brief segment to be like, ah, that's funny, like right
Yeah.
there. So he's thinking so hard to make this so simple and accessible.
Now,
and that's very
I'm
commendable.
curious. Question to the three of you. Does the quality of, we'll use Bo Burnham as a case study, but there's stretches outside of Bo Burnham. Does the quality of the expression dictate whether or not he is valid in his expression? Like if he made a not particularly funny song, the lyrics just didn't really flow, the jokes didn't land as hard, but the theme, intent, and structure was exactly the same. Is he no longer qualified to talk about it? I guess like a question before that would just be, are we saying thumbs up to Bo? You can
think
do
so.
that song. You can keep doing that song that exists.
Congratulations.
You may keep your Netflix
You may
special.
keep your Netflix special. I will answer that. So I think it works very well because it is so tightly executed, and because, like you said, the lighting, the aesthetic, everything contributes to this apparently long form meta expression of
It's true. Like
Check it out.
it's true. I actually recommend watching What and
Make
which-
happy.
Make Happy.
This is just a bow cast.
Now this is a bowcast. Bo,
No, I'm
please
just
come
saying,
on our
like,
show.
Sounds like a
you-
type of bow.
like
Jordan
Jordan and I-
cast.
Jordan and I have a lot of similarities. One of which is that
Oh,
we-
name 19.
one of which is that we met and just had the same. It's like, oh, Bo Burnham, Pete Holmes, College Humor, like just all we have the same comedic
Chad.
beat, like references.
Best friend, Chad.
Chad. What I think of when I think of Chad is a SNL sketch with Andy Samberg where he was. It was a joke about the African country of Chad, where it was just a sign that said Chad, and it was a dude going, "Hi, I'm Chad," and that's all it was.
Was that your friend?
Oh
Was he the
yeah,
nation?
the Chad. Yeah, all uppercase.
But yeah, we independently. we independently are huge fans of Bo Burnham.
Okay, right. So anyway, what I was
So the more important thing, and let's get back on track.
I don't.
Do you
No,
love
I
theater?
Back to Saigon.
oh man.
Sorry.
No, that was great. I think it probably lands more universally with a wider audience because it was like both a well-written song, it had good lyrics, it was musically sound, he had a full production stage, so it presentationally was really solid and very professionally, like it was just tight as a performance.
And people bought tickets and were
people
sitting
bought
there in the
tickets,
crowd.
right.
And they have a part.
Yeah,
in
unlike your
validating the
shows,
performance.
Jarvis.
But I
Zing!
don't.
Actually, I'm just
Yes!
kidding.
What
I have bought multiple tickets to some of your shows, so that is obviously not true for those. And the context of the joke makes it.
Okay, I
inside
feel-
this
I feel
room,
bad now 'cause
and don't hurt
if
me,
you'd seen the first half of the
please.
special that Tyler just performed for me, and only me.
Chad, don't hit me, not again.
Okay, we're gonna let Laura finish.
All right, so I'm
talking
gonna
this
finish
time.
my conversation. I really want to like drive home the point that I don't think that high production validates
Sure.
comedy or art.
Mm.
I think that the same message could have been translated through a ton of different, like mechanisms, and I think that that's something that a lot of artists do in their art, like visual artists, comedians, musicians. I mean, especially musicians. So many sad songs. And like people connect with that because I think of the authenticity of experience,
Mm.
And if you're making it funny, maybe it needs a little bit more to like connect to a wider range of people so that you can kind of disarm the people who don't
Yeah.
have the experience with it and get them comfortable with it, whatever. So I think it becomes more accessible possibly because it is very well executed. But I think that the same you could have the same effect on people and have it be something that's like completely pared down and not as high level. I
Yeah,
guess.
the high level just attributes to making it that much better, not necessarily because
Well,
it's
I don't
high
think
level.
it's
though.
better though. I think it's I think it's potentially more accessible for people.
Sure.
But like I'm a fan of street art. Like I don't think that there's anything better about what Bo did than like if he was busking on the sidewalk. I think that is just as authentic of a way of expressing.
Yeah, I
agree.
don't. Well, I guess I have no statement to make about like comedy versus street art, but I will say that like he's threading a needle there. Comedy is playing with fire. Anything could have fallen. Any one thing could have missed the mark, and it's suddenly offensive, right?
Yeah.
If he's not coming from that experience, if he changed that one word, like that one concept of kill yourself to one of the other 5 things that Bo couldn't speak about, it doesn't matter any of the other stuff. Then now it's immediately like tanked its message, right? So what's impressive to me about it is I value comedy and I value what he's doing with the form. And part of the form is making people uncomfortable with premises and like improving an argument. Like Chris Rock thinks of it like a legal defense. And to make someone uncomfortable and then win them back is like kind of the ebb and flow of comedy. And you can never win them back with comedy because you already make them uncomfortable. Whereas like the stakes are lower in terms of like, I don't often like see street art and just like am disgusted and want to just like leave.
Street art, more like street fart. Am I right?
Yeah,
nailed
but
it.
comedy,
Is he
it's
right?
like
Can we look at
Please stop.
comedy. Someone
Please
can
take that one out.
someone can heckle. I agree that it doesn't impact the overall value or impact on other people, but it's sort of like in that art form, the game that they're playing, the stakes are probably higher,
Right.
for whatever reason, just because of they've chosen that art form. I guess.
And the first time I saw this, I only listened to the first verse, and it was because I was showing it to somebody else to be like, "Oh, Bo Burnham, check it out," and I'm like horrified that this is the first thing that starts coming on, and then it's a friend who knows that I've struggled with depression and suicide, and he's looking at me like, "How are you going to react to it?" I'm like, "I don't know," so just like
I
pause
love that process you went through. You saw that it was a track and you were like, okay, cool, excited to get another song from my best friend Bo. It's called Kill Yourself. Well, nothing to ward me off so far. Not only will I play
clicked on the first link without looking at the words.
Not only will I listen to this, but I will listen with a friend for the first time. Back to a full verse.
I clicked on it without looking at the words or really my computer at all.
I fell on my phone and Bo appeared.
Oh man. Now that we've talked about Bo as like a good example and archetype of what we're talking about comedically, I actually
But uncomfortable. Not particularly like it's good, but it's complicated.
Yeah, exactly. We have decompressed all of these layers. I kind of want to take a look at a thing that none of you have seen. Probably only has a few hundred views on YouTube. I stumbled across it because I'm on that side of YouTube. So now that we've looked at like an example of what we kind of thought was good and very complex and deconstructed Bo's comedy, I kind of want to take a look of something that I don't think is necessarily good and I think is actually pretty harmful depiction of mental health. I'm not going to say anything about it or even mention this creator because I don't want to give attention to it. So I just won't say anything. I'll just play it and see what you guys think rather than affect what you think of it.
It was pretty good. Hit a little cookout.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you? What'd you do this weekend?
Not much. Tried killing myself on Saturday.
Oh.
No, but the rope snapped, so.
I've got a great rope in my garage if you want me to come over and swing by.
Yeah, sure, bring it over.
All right, see you in a few.
What? I was joking.
What the fuck? It's not something you joke about.
I thought we were both being stupid.
Mate, I drove all the way out here. Okay, well, I wasn't going to tell you this, but I couldn't find the rope. Right, and I felt bad because I said I was going to bring it. So I went to the store and I bought one. Because that's what friends do. They keep their promises. Now I find out you're lying to me? What kind of friend are you?
What are you doing?
Lexa, he drove all the way out here. And he bought this for me. Do you even know how much these cost?
It's like $17.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll help.
So at the end, he puts a noose over his neck, and I'm okay with being disagreed on this. This is something that I probably would have found funny in high school, and I think there's still elements of this that was like created well, but it just makes. I want to get what you guys think.
I want to ask Jarvis a question right before we dive into it, because you're also a person that overanalyzes sketch comedy, like myself.
Yeah.
Did it feel to you like 4 other sketches almost happened? Like there was like a setup of straight man absurdist like 3 different times, and I was like, oh, it's a bit where he says that he killed himself, but the other guy just ignores it. It's like, oh no, it's a bit where he says that he killed himself, but then like the other guy loves it. Or I was so confused.
The pacing of the sketch didn't make any sense.
Very strange.
Like because it led you in one place, and then it was just like swoosh. Here's a. But I don't know. My first impression is like. The production quality is like too high. Like someone has an expensive camera. It like looked like it was shot on a Sony A7R or something like that.
Yeah, but without any color.
Without
grading.
any color grading. No, like shot straight out of the
Yeah.
camera.
Clean whitewashed 2008 era action video. Vignettes on the corners.
And then the other thought was just like, it's like I get
exactly.
get what the joke is.
Mhm.
Like the joke is I'm already here. I already did this thing for you. I already am doing this favor for you. The least you can do is like humor me, except for taking that to the extreme where it's killing yourself. But the setup for it is like weak and unearned. It's like, how was your weekend? I tried to kill myself.
Yeah, there's no Bo Burnham's posture. There's no initial part of the.
There's no set. You have to own, like, you have to earn a setup of. I tried to kill myself. It doesn't just come after the same thing you said. What'd you do this weekend? I went to a barbecue. What'd you do this weekend? I tried to kill myself. Like you're right. It's like 4 things. It's like the joke could be the guy who casually mentions really intense things. Even in that joke, you don't start with kill yourself. Right? Like,
that's what's indicative to me of like, oh, this is just a very different kind of people. This is a very different kind of humor, because I didn't realize, it never even crossed my mind that he might be doing a bit over the phone. It was like, oh, this weekend I killed myself. Ha ha ha. Or I tried to kill myself, right? And that's a joke. Like, I wouldn't have even considered it. And then when he opened the door and he was like, oh, I was just doing a joke, I was surprised. I felt like the audience was supposed to be on his side. Like, yeah, that's just a crazy thing you say to your buddy over the phone, and he's reacting by bringing you a noose. That's nuts. Wow, what a kooky character.
The other thing, oh my god, I'm like I want to go so deep on this.
Please do.
First of all, it's 1 minute long, so it just feels like tried really hard to be 1 minute long.
It's exactly 1 minute long. Yeah.
The other thing is that like there were so many ways to get to killed myself in jest in a way that like feels more natural. Like the line at the DMV was so long I wanted to kill myself.
Yeah.
Like they're already, you could have just replaced the words that he said with words that actually set up the thing, and then the audience is like kind of like, oh, I know about people who exaggerate. This guy just literally said I tried to kill myself. What does that mean? I have more questions than I have answers now.
And I have to assume that that's just a demographic and age and style and thing where that is just a thing people say.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, it has a few hundred views. Maybe it's just a bad joke.
That's also entirely feasible.
I think it's both, because I was definitely one of those people in high school who just like anything that's absurd is funny to me. Like they go to and
it's
like
dark. You don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's something to this video that like there is like actually like a nugget in there that's like there's something funny that you're getting at, and you're kind of you touched it, and then you went in the opposite direction. Like there's that moment where like he comes in and he's like, oh, I brought this noose. I'm like, that could have been a very funny portion of a sketch if done like right with other context of like the absurdity of like bringing your friend like a noose, but there was no context and no social commentary whatsoever.
I definitely read like we went through this exact sketch in 15 seconds doing a bit and we're just gonna write it down. And then he turns up at the door with a noose. What? That's crazy.
To me it feels like a sketch writing class. Like, because it's just like it just doesn't do a lot of things right. For example, like the only joke that makes any sense that's funny, the only joke that's funny in this is when he gives the specific of how expensive the rope was. that's
And it convinces his roommate.
yeah, that's the only part. Like this was like $17. That's funny. Like the concept of like someone's like
Life
when he
being worth $17
when he quantifies the like. He's like, yeah, like the person, the straight man is like, what are you doing? And then his response is like, I mean, this was $17. Like that's a funny concept.
Yeah.
But the entire premise is like contrived, and then everything is predictable from that. Like nothing is earned, and then the only thing that's funny is a justification on a absurd premise, which is kind of a kernel of comedy, but it like lives in at the end and is not the focal point of this like long thing. So walking through the sketch, it's like you talk on the phone, you say, I killed myself. Okay, why? What?
Yeah.
That's not justified. Then the friend comes over and he brings his noose. So it's like, okay, so I guess this is just like happening straight then. Like is this even comedy? The only comedy here is that this is an unnatural way for a conversation to go. And
then, which unfortunately, despite the fact that this portion actually works in the sketch, it then relies on real world conversational factors. It says like, this is an absurd universe where nobody communicates the way they normally do. And then right at the end it goes, I was just kidding.
Yeah, and so that's what makes me think it's not so much an absurd universe as it is bad comedy.
Yeah. Inconsistent.
Yeah.
It's actually a really good parallel to the Bo video. Excellently done, Tyler May. This podcast is all right.
That's what I strive for. All right is better than my parents ever told me.
It's like one letter off from alt-right, so like
this podcast is
Very significant.
this podcast is alt-right.
We should say it's not on the episode because we asked you to turn it off, but in between you showing us the Bo video and this one, a lot of InfoWars stuff, my man. A lot of Alex Jones videos that you pulled up. I don't know why.
And we all agreed with them.
Right?
and you made us wear these weird hats.
I can't read, so I don't know what it says.
This was to keep out.
I mean, I got your name engraved on it, but
they're supposed to keep out the radio waves of the Clinton administration. I just know.
Have you watched the news in like the last year and a half? You're probably okay.
I just don't understand.
and to clarify with this video, like I wasn't mad that like they talked about suicide, and I wasn't even mad that like they did it in a bad way or it just wasn't funny. What I have the biggest problem with and what made me kind of most upset was that how they did this and the nature of this sketch makes the audience and the viewer normalize suicide and these difficult topics in a trivial way rather than as a complex idea like Bo Burnham did.
And for nothing.
Yeah, thank you guys for being on the podcast. I would love to talk to you more in depth about these things, and I will in person shortly, probably.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us over to your place. I really, it's really nice.
If you want to pay me rent, because I have people like Jordan Cope staying over all the time and not giving
thank
me
you for inviting me to my apartment to record this podcast.
You're welcome anytime.
It's very fun. I don't think we don't really do other podcasts. We would like to.
On principle. No.
They're all so bad.
I'm glad I had you sign this contract that makes you state Mr. Fields podcast on every episode of Sad Boys from here on out.
No.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I had you over for advertisement and SEO purposes. Jarvis taught me how to use tags, so I'm using that against you.
Speaking of plugs, are we in the plug zone right now?
Oh, I think we're in the plug zone.
Living in the plug zone.
Yeah, live in the plug zone. Hit it up. Plug into those outlets.
You get plugs.
Jarvis is doing the theme. Let him finish the theme. And there's 4 more verses.
Yeah. Plug zone. It's where you give plugs and where you give your guest hugs and talk about bugs.
You're that annoying bug kid in Pokemon just waiting in the grasses.
I'm bug catcher Jarvis.
Me and my good friend Jarvis, who also appeared on this episode as a cameo, host a show called Sad Boys, and you can find it online. Is that correct?
That's correct. Me and my friend Jordan, who also tested on this episode.
I was a cameo, yeah.
Yeah, a small cameo on this episode. We host a podcast together called
We are devolving very fast.
I'm honestly not sure if we do. We might not host a show called
Not
Sad
after
Boys.
this episode is up.
Yeah. So you can find us. That's Sad Boys with a Z on Spotify, on Google Music, on iTunes, all the places.
Jarvis, I want to get more Jarvis Johnson in my life. Where do I go to do exactly that?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Jarvis. That's right. I have my first name as my Twitter handle. And you know what? Just do that, or you can find me on YouTube.
Yeah, Jarvis actually makes wonderful videos and has started making YouTube videos and has far surpassed anything that I've ever done in my life.
You always
Have you-
you always frame this as if it's like he's surpassed me, as if you're like Vegeta and I'm Goku and I became a Super Saiyan first.
No.
Jarvis, have you ever made any videos about mental health?
You know, I'm like discussing it head on, applied directly to the forehead.
Oh. Oh, for those who that joke will hit, it will hit very hard in the head.
Give them some time to finish laughing, because it's going to be like 15 minutes.
Oh, we've lost Tyler May. Just keep.
All right, it's fine. This is now Sad Boys. Tyler May's gone. Yeah.
If this were Sad Boys, this part would last for 4 hours.
This would be the podcast.
And then we'll start talking about School of Rock.
Okay. I have not addressed mental health like directly on the channel, but I've talked a bit about imposter syndrome, and I plan one day to talk about mental health. It's very hard to talk about correctly, which is why I really appreciate the work that you two are doing here on Mr. Fields.
Oh, well then this gives it a perfect avenue for you to talk about it in the future. Be like, hey, plug Mr. Fields.
I'm officially trained.
Want to feel more sad?
That's our
Listen
tagline.
to Mr. Fields.
Sadder Boys.
This would make you sad enough. Here's a depressing podcast.
Hey, all goofs and gaffs aside, I think Mr. Fields is a really cool show. And I think it has exactly the tone I want from a show that tackles these kind of topics. I have listened to every episode, and I haven't posted an iTunes review, and that stinks.
That's okay.
Hey,
I've
Jordan.
posted an iTunes review for myself.
That's
so.
a good.
What was
That's
that?
a good
An
plug.
iTunes what?
A resume.
An
resume.
iTunes review?
That's a good plug. If you listen to the show, we would love and appreciate your comments and reviews, I think is what they're called.
Yeah.
It helps other people who might be interested in this topic and benefit from it find our show.
And we'll shout it out on the podcast.
Jordan.
Hi.
Jordan, where can we find you?
Oh, do you have to?
It's. I was gonna say your address, and then I couldn't think of a joke
My real
address
actual
besides
address?
your actual address.
Yeah, you can find me at Jordan Adika, one word, on Twitter. And if you are interested in helping me find a handle that is not just my actual name that I can
like
use
it.
on video games,
Oh,
because
on
I
video
don't like
games.
people criticizing me with my real
Jordan
name.
Adika, you.
This is a campaign we have going on currently on Sad Boys. I need help finding it. Honestly, I downloaded a new game recently, which was using a service I'd never used before. So I had to come up with a new username, and I sat there for 20 minutes, and I still put Jordan Adika. I just don't. I don't have one. I feel like we all. It's like when you have to decide to start having a signature.
Jordan Vegeta.
Jordan Vegeta, very cool. Now they can say my real name, and then not my real name.
Yeah, I have the benefit of just using all the names I made up when I was like 12.
Jarvis, what were all your names when you were 12?
The main one is
And you're-
Magic Jarvis.
Oh,
Yes.
that's actually good.
You know what?
That's
disappointed.
just truth.
In retrospect, the first
Aw.
one I ever had actually would make a cool duo. You can be Magic Jarvis because I was Blaze Jord.
Oh, jeez.
Nothing to do with weed. I honestly had no idea.
Blaze
I
it.
was 9.
Yeah, I seriously was a kid. I was just
And
like,
I
Blaze
choked
is.
it up every 420.
I lit up
Blaze
incense.
Jordan.
I was 9 out of 10.
High in the sky. Blaze George 420.
This is the longest outro we've ever had.
Yeah, but
and
that's
the
where you-
longest episode we've ever.
That's where you can get some Jordan Cope in your life if you want, but you probably don't. I would rather get some Laura Benson. How the hell do I do that?
Wow.
In fact, I would like Laura Benson in a musical capacity. How do I do that?
Oh, we've never
Laura
mentioned
Benson
that
is on
the
tour right now.
podcast.
Wink, wink.
Well, I'm not on tour yet. I'll be on tour in 2 days.
I think I'm gonna release
But
this
when
episode
this-
in 2 days.
Really?
Yeah.
I think
okay,
I'm
if
gonna
you
go
release
hard.
this episode before we go on tour, then I'll be in New Mexico and Colorado when it goes out.
And what will
Let's
you
do
be
it.
Singing
called?
sad songs
Yeah.
about depression
And sad boys.
and human experience.
It's not ready for this
That's
demographic.
what my musical endeavors are. You can find me on Instagram at Laura Bensonista.
Laura
What,
Benson
excuse
E
you?
with the Y.
No, not a Y. LauraBenSonIsta, because I also made my handle when I was younger.
Nice.
Yes.
And if you
Nice.
have any suggestions for Laura for a better handle, please.
I like
message her.
Bunsen burner. And my band you can find on Facebook is called Late for the Train. So you can
It's-
find us on the road.
Damn straight it
in
is.
Colorado.
And you can expect a record release soon.
Hot
Yeah, we're
banger.
we're recording our first album. And we also will have merch as of Tuesday.
Oh shit, she's ahead of the curve.
Available online or in person?
I don't even haven't figured it out yet. In person, you have to come to our shows.
All right, go to the
Young-
shows.
Young Tyler May. I don't know if you've noticed, but Jordan and I host your podcast now.
Yeah.
We've finally done it. Where can we find you?
You can find me at Tyler May Media on all social media and at tylermaymedia.com. I have a website and I just made a page where you can purchase prints of my photos.
That's
And
true.
They're
I
very
feel
nice.
I
You
feel
should buy
vulnerable.
prints. And you should buy prints on your website, Tyler May, because you're preparing for a trip.
Mm-hmm.
Where to?
India.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm going with a nonprofit, and if you could help me make money, I'm struggling.
Not with money.
To be fair,
Just
No,
struggling.
in general,
Yeah.
in my relationships.
Soundboys ends their show with "We love you" and we're sorry. Mr. Fields ends with "Goodbye" and struggling.
And 45 extra minutes of you screaming.
I
So-
feel like that's a
I'm struggling.
that's very apropos for a mental health podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like struggling is the term that many of us in the community
Yeah.
use.
I like that. Do you
Do you can we end
Should
it
we
like
close
that?
it out like that? What's the exact quote you want?
Well, before that, go to tylermaymedia.com/prints. And also, I just uploaded a YouTube video today for the first time in like 5 months.
We're actually a very tonally related
Is
YouTube
it?
video.
Yes, it is.
Thematically tied YouTube video.
Yeah, I haven't showed it to anybody, and I haven't looked at anything surrounding it.
Sure.
What's it about?
It's about mental health and community and YouTube. So if you're involved at all in the YouTube community, or if you're curious about the YouTube community and the effects of fame and success has on your mental well-being, I respond to a couple creators, Casey Neistat and Elle Mills' recent videos and how they provide a narrative surrounding mental health. And you can look at that at youtube.com/TylerMayMedia.
Watch videos, consume music.
This
Look
is the
at
most
Jarvis's
I've ever
Instagram.
plugged myself. I feel like I just like had to take a deep breath. I'm like, all right, I am done promoting myself, but do you mind if we end it like
With your new cool
Singing
catchphrase.
with our new catchphrase rather than, because sad boys say every episode,
We love you.
we love you and we're
we're
sorry.
sorry.
But we're struggling here.
What if we say oh no, I can't. I just think I go
No, that's good. That's good. All right. That's 3, 2, 1.
Oh, no, I can't.
Hey, thanks again for listening to this episode of Mr. Feels. Sorry for the sound right now. I'm in a cafe about to export this podcast, but before I do, I wanted to share with you something super cool. We've always promised to give a percentage of all Patreon donations to charities that support mental health, but for the first time, we will give 100% of what has been donated to us already, combined with all future donations leading up to June 15th. To write love on our arms. So if you want to help support charity and charities that support mental health, go to patreon.com/MrFeels and give us $1 or however much you want. It really helps out people. So if you want to do that, your cutoff date is June 15th. So please go to patreon.com/MrFeels now, and we're going to be able to give all that money to people who need it. So do that, and thank you so much for listening.